Academy 2.0, where we focus on giving you the opportunity to learn from professionals from various fields that help you explore your passions and interests. Hi, my name is Elaine, and today I will be interviewing Professor Didi, an educational researcher at the Harvard Graduate School of Education who specializes in technologies that can enhance teaching, learning, assessment, and links between school and life. Today, I will ask a series of interesting questions about Professor Didi's work for him to answer. This video will showcase the highlights of this conversation, but if you are interested in listening to the full interview, please feel free to tune into our Spotify using the link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's get started. So thank you so much, Professor Didi, for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. So to get started, it would be great if you could introduce yourself, including your area of expertise and a fun fact you want us to know.
Sure. So I got my doctorate over half a century ago in the early 1970s in science education. And I gradually changed from a science educator to a faculty member who studies learning technologies. And for 22 years, I was the Timothy Eworth Professor of Learning Technologies at Harvard University, the fourth university that I was part of. And then now I've gone to half-time and I'm a senior research fellow in Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And two of the technologies that in my long career I've focused on particularly, one of them is artificial intelligence and the other one is immersive learning. The fun fact would be that I got really interested in immersive learning in 1978, 45 years ago, when the very, very first computer game came out. It was called Zork, The Underground Empire. That very, very simple text-based game fascinated a lot of people, and they found it quite immersive. And that revealed the power of immersion to me. So I've been wrestling with immersion ever since.
Yeah, so you mentioned how a lot of your work is in immersive learning. So can you just give us a little introduction of what immersive learning even is?
So immersion is a psychological state. And I guess the simplest way to describe it is your mind is in a different place than your body is. And that sounds really weird when you say it that way, but we've all been immersed many times. You go to the movie theater, and within 5 minutes, you're not aware anymore that you're sitting in a seat in a movie theater surrounded by strangers. You're with Harry Potter at Hogwarts, or you're with, whoever it is in the movie, in whatever the movie is drawing you into. It's potentially very powerful for learning, because if you think of all the kinds of rooms that you're in your daily life, probably the most boring of them is a classroom. And by being immersed, they can be in a virtual kind of a space. Now, there's different flavors of immersion. At one end of the spectrum, many people now have experienced virtual reality, VR, where you have on something like a head-mounted display and all of your senses are immersed. You don't know what's happening outside of where you are. There's augmented reality. Some people may have played Pokemon Go when that came out, where you could go outside and look through your phone and see Pokemon people. Mm-hmm. That's augmented reality. And there's a lot of uses of augmented reality in industry and education and medicine and so on. There are realities in between called mixed realities, like if you're playing an internet game. So now they just talk about XR, and XR is an umbrella term that covers all of those. But people have done educational applications for all of those flavors. It's like having a toolbox with a hammer and a wrench and a saw. Depending on what you're trying to do, sometimes you want the hammer and sometimes you want the wrench.
Yeah. How do you think that this visualization will help people learn, and where is this technology in use currently?
So the broader term for where I think immersive technologies are most useful is what's called situated learning. And situated learning is when the context that you're in is part of the learning itself. It's not just where you happen to be, it's actually part of the learning. And as an example, I and colleagues at Harvard developed 4 curricula that used virtual worlds, like internet game virtual worlds, for learning ecosystem scientists. But their minds were inside of their avatars, inside of virtual ecosystems, where they were actively exploring and doing things that ecosystem scientists do. So a lot of where I see this having value in education is in school settings where you can take people to interesting concepts and contexts and have them interact actively rather than just passively assimilating, because the immersive technology lets you do that. Examples in schools now beyond research curricula, like there's a company that I work with that's a French VR company called Wanda, and they have developed a really interesting French language application where you enter a virtual world that's set up like Paris, and you go to a French art museum virtually, and there's a murder that you discover inside of the museum, and then you have to work as a detective to try to solve the murder. And so you've got this really interesting narrative that you're experiencing as part of trying to learn French. So those are examples of immersive learning that are getting a lot of traction in education.
So also kind of going back to the educational aspect of it, do you see immersive learning really being an integral part of our curriculum, like 20 years from now, or?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you may have heard and read about the metaverse, the idea that people will spend most of their time as an avatar in a virtual world. But although I'm a big fan of immersive learning, I'm very skeptical about the idea of immersive living. The virtual world can be very, very interesting and magical, but it's nothing like the real world. I mean, it's the real world has so much more than any virtual world that we can create. And people start to get headaches and other kinds of what's called simulator sickness. And so there's good reasons why people are not going to spend huge amounts of time immersed, but you can prepare to be immersed. You can be immersed for a little while and do something really interesting, and then you can debrief on what that was like. And that's an effective way of learning.
So also, what's one example of past work that you've done in immersive learning that is most memorable to you?
Well, I talked about the ecosystem, so I'll talk about something different. In 1999, I and colleagues spent 10 years building an earlier virtual world called River City. And River City was for middle school students, and it took people back in time a century. So it was historically accurate. It was set in about 1870. And people in River City were getting sick from different diseases, 3 different diseases that were actually historically authentic. And the challenge for kids going back in time was to be an epidemiologist and to figure out which people had which disease and what the city could do to combat these diseases. So kids were learning both history and scientific inquiry, epidemiology at the same time. And it was a really interesting project because when we started, the whole idea of educational games, people just thought was crazy. I mean, this was very early in virtual worlds. Games were thought of as just something that takes kids away from learning, not something that you could use for learning. But by the end of the 10 years, River City was very well established and respected. The whole internet gaming world had changed, and a lot of people were starting to build educational games. So it was like doing something early that became part of a sea change that took place.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like you can really connect like the bridge between learning and games. Like I feel like that doesn't have to be necessarily like 2 distinct things, but like something that can, yeah, that's really cool. So kind of the last question, what's like one piece of advice that you would give to like students that are kind of interested in the same field of kind of combining games and learning together into like a virtual world?
So my advice would be to think about storytelling, because people are really wired to learn from stories. And that's what we find engaging as well. And sometimes you can take something that is a boring thing and make it interesting through a story. So one of the examples I use in my motivation course is, what if you have to build a game that teaches safe driving? Now we know that driving games are very popular and people will spend a lot of money on them, but they teach the opposite of safe driving. You do all this crazy stuff in a car. But how do you make a safe driving game interesting? Well, you use a story. So one of the stories would be that you're a bomb disposal expert, and you're the one that has the duty of taking a bomb away from a public place and very, very carefully taking it to the bomb disposal site where you can get rid of it. And if you go too fast, the bomb will go off. If you hit a bump, the bomb will go off. If you go too slow, the timer on the bomb will go off. And so you have to drive perfectly. Lost. Mm-hmm. That story is a way that something that's kind of boring can be made at least somewhat interesting. And that would be my advice, that when you think about immersive learning, think about how to make whatever the person is learning embedded within the cultural context of a story.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. I feel like we definitely learned so much from this interview. And I think it kind of opened my kind of world to how we can combine two separate things into one through immersive learning. So
well, thank you. Thank you for asking me. And I'm happy that you're doing Academy 2.0.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you, Professor Didi, and thank you for watching. I hope this interview helped you gain more interest in understanding technologies that build the bridge between school and other aspects of life. Please check out our Spotify via the link in the description for the full interview. If you are interested in more content like this, explore all the other videos we have on our channel. We hope to see you in our future videos as we explore other intriguing topics.